Hey guys, this is White Rock and Montana chess coach Andrew Rankin. Today I want to share with you the first installment on our new series called Buffing Your Black Repertoire. This series is going to demonstrate exemplary games played from the black perspective by me and other White Rock chess coaches. We're going to split each game into 2 or 3 sections, the opening, the middle game, and the end game. Although each game will be different, they will cover openings from the black side, which creates similar pawn structures, similar development, similar middle game strategies, similar tactical opportunities, and hopefully similar endgame patterns. Today's video features the Semi Slav. This is when black creates a solid pawn triangle with c6, d5, and e6, and develops his pieces to either break in the center or on the queen side. So naturally, the game starts with d4, d5, c4. This is the queen's gambit. We could take the pawn, which is the queen's gambit accepted. However, then we don't have a central pawn anymore, and we're giving up control of our space in the center. We could play the move e6. This is called the queen's gambit declined, and it's probably the most solid way of playing against the queen's gambit. Or what we're going to look at today is the Slav defense, which is c6. And the most natural reply to the Slav defense is putting more pressure on black's center with the move knight to c3. And we could play a move like knight to f6, which would be part of the Slav defense, but today we're going to look at the Semi-Slav, which is featured by the move e6. So we have this nice solid pawn triangle in the center, and this is the same pawn structure that you'll see in the Caro-Kann defense, which you all know I really like to play from the black side against the move e4. So here white is going to most likely play one of two moves, either knight to f3, however that allows us to take and then play b5 and possibly hold on to an extra pawn. And so that's why my opponent played the second most common option, which is the move e3, so that his bishop is now guarding the c4 pawn and the pawn is no longer being gambited, as we say. And now because black has spent 3 moves developing pawns to get a nice solid pawn structure, we really need to start developing our pieces. And so knights before bishops, we should play the move knight to f6. And our opponent will also do the same thing and develop his kingside knight with the move knight to f3. And now we have a couple of options. We can continue to develop our knights like knight b to d7. I think this move is perfectly fine. But we also have the option of the move a6, which I played, and this is part of the Shebanenko Slav. And the idea is that we're going to play the move b5. For example, if he plays the move bishop to d3, we can play b5. And now if he takes, we take like this, and we get this nice pawn structure. And if he takes in the center, then we play c takes, and again we end up with the same pawn structure. So all we do is gain space, basically. And if white isn't careful after the move b5 and castles, then of course we would just take the pawn. Maybe even d takes is better, and black is up a pawn and winning a tempo against the bishop. Another idea with the move a6 is to take the pawn, winning a tempo against the bishop, and then playing the move b5, and then your bishop will go to b7. So there's a lot of interesting ideas with this seemingly innocent move a6. I, however, decided not to tell my opponent whether I was going to play b5, bishop b7, take, and then b5, and then bishop b7, or whether I simply wanted to use the move a6 in the future to grab space. So I developed my knight, which is the most flexible move. You guys know that I like to keep all of my options open. And of course, naturally, my opponent castled his king. And I would really like to castle my king too to get to safety. But I first need to develop this bishop. So what do you think is a great square for the bishop? e7, d6, or b4? Alright, I hope you guys found the move bishop to d6. The reason why we don't want to go to b4 is because after a3 we lose a tempo. We'll probably end up going back to d6. We definitely don't want to trade off our dark square bishop. With all of our pawns on light squares, this dark square bishop is very valuable. We cannot trade him off for a knight. We have to keep this bishop on the board if his dark square bishop is still on the board. This is probably black's most valuable piece. So bishop to d6, our bishop is attacking his king, just like white's bishop is probably best placed on d3, attacking our king side. And so now, just like we have kind of a problem bishop on c8, our opponent has a problem bishop on c1. Instead of finding a move like rook to e1, preparing e4, and then bishop to g5, getting the bishop out to a great square right away, our opponent plays the move bishop to d2. Now I think this is a bad piece. He is really not controlling any squares, and he has no mobility. This piece, however, is not a bad piece, and the reason is because we're going to play moves that free the bishop once we get our king safe. So we're going to castle our king. Our opponent played a3, preparing to play the move b4. And now is the time to get our bishop into the game. And so we're going to play d takes c4, winning a tempo on his bishop. Bishop takes c4. And again, we could play the move b5, bishop b7, and then c5, and our bishop will be really strong on this long diagonal. But another pawn break that actually activates this bishop right away to the king side is the move e5. And this move is very tricky for white, because white actually doesn't want the center to open because his two bishops and his queen are actually not coordinating very well. And usually if your pieces are slightly underdeveloped or not coordinating perfectly, you want to be very careful about opening up the center because your opponent's attack could come very fast. And that's why my opponent decided to play bishop to d3, just stopping the pawn from getting to e4. Now if we want to play the move e4, what move should we play? So we can't play it right away because the bishop will take. So how can we prepare the move e4? Alright, I hope you found the move rook to e8. So now we're threatening e4, which forks the knight and the bishop. So he has to solve his problems. If he plays pawn takes, then knight takes, and we're attacking the bishop and the knight. And if we end up trading this knight, for example, pawn takes, knight takes, bishop takes, this bishop is under attack from our queen, and his king no longer has a key defender. So this variation is not going to be looking very good for white because his pieces, again, are just not very well coordinated, and he's losing a key defender of his king. So that's why my opponent decided to move the bishop. So he moves his bishop back to c2, and his idea is that he's going to play queen to d3 and create a battery attacking my king in the future. And now I decided to play e takes d4. So if he takes with the knight, then again he's removing a key defender of his king. And if he takes with the pawn, now we call this an isolated pawn. There are no pawns on either side of the pawn, and so this is going to be a long-term weakness that we can play against. Alright, now I want you guys to figure out how we can get this knight out of the way of this bishop. So find a key square for this knight to go to so that we can activate our light square bishop and complete development. Alright, I imagine most of you found the move knight to b6 with the idea of going knight to d5. And this is a great plan because this is an outpost square. The knight can never be kicked out from d5, and he blockades the isolated pawn on d4. The problem with this, however, is that again, his king side is really what we want to attack. Our bishops are aimed at his king side, and our pawn structure is telling us to either play towards the king side or at least in the center. And moving the knight to b6 is moving our knight away from the center and away from the king side. So instead, I actually like getting the knight to the square g6. Now, how can we get this knight to the square g6? We go knight to f8, and then knight to g6 on the next move. So he played the move bishop to he played the move h3, which makes sense because he wants to stop the bishop from going to g4. So we're still going to have to work to get this bishop into the game. And now we finish our knight maneuver with knight to g6. And now he plays bishop to e3. Again, this bishop is still not a very good piece. We can argue that is his bad piece. But at least it's protecting his isolated pawn in the center. And now I want you guys to find a way to create a queen and bishop battery pointing at the king, which threatens checkmate. So you could play the move queen to c7, but our bishop's not really going to be attacking anything. So I want the queen in front of the bishop, and that's why I played the move bishop to c7, so that I can play queen to d6 and attack with the queen at the front, which would threaten checkmate. My opponent plays the move queen to d3, and I finish with queen to d6. And now we have this interesting situation where both of our queens are queen and bishop batteries, aiming to checkmate our opponent's king. However, my knights are doing an excellent job defending my king. His knight, however, is the only defender, and so I just need to get rid of him. And that's why he decides to bring another knight over to g3 square to further protect his king. And now, this knight is the only piece standing in between my queen checkmating his king and him losing the game. So, since this is my piece that's not yet developed, and this is the piece that's in the way of my attack, how do I trade the bishop on c8 for the knight on f3? So the move that we want to play is bishop to e6 so that we can go to d5 and then take the knight. He plays knight to g3, and again we play bishop to d5, just getting ready to take the knight. And he doesn't really like the idea of bishop takes knight, damaging his pawn structure around his king and creating forever weaknesses against his king. For example, we threaten something like, for example, if he played b5, we could play bishop takes, pawn takes, and if he ever moved his queen away, let's say the queen moved away, then we could play a move like rook takes bishop, pawn takes, and then queen takes. So he has lots of weaknesses in this position, and that's why he decided he didn't want me to take his knight, and he played knight to d2. The problem with this move, however, is that now black has a series of moves that basically win the game. So this is going to be the end of the opening because we've gotten all of our pieces into the game. The only move left to play is rook to d8. However, we're going to continue to play 2 or 3 moves just to show you that as soon as you finish your development, if you get all of your pieces to good squares, tactics will come immediately. So the move knight to d2 means that this knight is now the only piece in the way of us checkmating his king. So how can we attack this knight and remove the defender of his king? So the move is knight to h5. If he takes, again, it's checkmate. And we're threatening simply knight takes, pawn takes, and then queen takes, and then our queen is still getting in. So he decides to attack our queen with knight to c4. And now I'm going to pause my video and have you guys find a series of moves that's going to win material. Alright, so hopefully you guys found the move bishop takes knight, queen takes bishop because the queen was under attack, and now we have knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, and then rook takes bishop because this pawn was overloaded protecting the knight and the bishop. Now we do have to be careful because he has the move queen takes f7, but our king can simply hop over to h8 and our king is perfectly safe. Even though he's going to play knight takes, pawn takes, our queen is actually protecting this pawn quite nicely, and our rook is active and our other rook is about to get into the game. So we could even go to f8. So this is the end of the opening, and a good example of how good opening development leads to winning ideas in the middle game. So I'm going to stop here and hope you guys enjoyed that. Thank you.